感谢麦团，感谢甜点，感谢如是我闻，谢谢这些观众朋友们对于我们的支持。稍后华尔街联报继续为您带来过去24小时的最新消息以及评论报道。
观众朋友大家好，欢迎收看今天的新风视线。9月20日，广州市发布稳楼市新政，对广州现行的房地产限购政策做出了优化。业内人士分析认为，广州此次开始放松，意味着限购松绑令开始进入到中国的1线城市，信号意义非常强烈。9月20号，广州发布的稳楼市新政中包括调整住房限购政策的实施区域范围，二手房增值税免征期5年改2年，非户籍人口首套购房非户籍人口首套房购置纳税。非户籍人口首套房购置纳税社保年限也从5年缩短至2年等等。此前，南京、武汉等中国2线城市都在全面放松限购政策，广州此次开始放松，意味着限购松绑开始进入到1线城市，说明当前政策的放松力度非常大。分析人士认为，此次广州供需两端一揽子政策意在托底，稳定市场情绪。目标是将广州商品房市场在年内从持续过快下滑逐渐转入到探底企稳的走势。具体来看，9月20号发布的这一份叫做《关于优化我市房地产市场平稳健康发展政策的通知》，通知中称，还是要坚持房子是用来住的，不是用来炒的这一定位，但是要适应房地产市场供求关系发生重大变化的新形势。围绕稳地价、稳房价、稳预期的目标来精准施策。那么根据广州市房地产市场的实际情况，现在有2大改革。第一是优化住房限购和增值税免税的年限。在广州越秀、海珠、荔湾、天河、白云等区购买住房的广州市户籍的居民家庭可以购买2套住房，而非广州市户籍的居民家庭限购1套住房。同时呢，这些地区的个人销售住房增值税征免年限从5年也调整为2年。通知的第2点则提出要加大保障性住房的建设和供给，政府将会大力加快推动公共租赁住房、保障性租赁住房和配售的保障性住房的发展，建立健全保障性的住房体系。这则通知并不长，就这么2点。那么易居研究院的研究总监严跃进认为，此次广州放松限购政策信号意义强烈，限购政策的放松本身就是认房不认贷以后全国各地的一个重要趋势。这次广州开始放松，意味着限购政策从2、3线城市放松开始，进入到了1线城市，政策松动程度非常大。对于广州此次稳楼市新政，广东省住房政策研究中心的首席研究员李宇嘉认为，通知是贯彻落实7月24号中央政治局会议关于适应房地产供求关系发生重大变化的新形势的要求。在新的形势下，中国不管是供求关系、房地产前景和房价预期，还是买房行为，都发生了重大变化。而且非常重要的是，这不是周期性的变化，而是一个趋势性的变化。因此，过去长期过热时期以紧缩需求端抑制为特征的调控政策，现在都不再适用了，是时候要退出了。李宇嘉还指出，值得注意的是，广州此次放松限购的地区当中，不包括就业集中、需求大的中心区4区，中心4区还是坚持原有的限购政策。而旨在打造大湾区创业宜居平台的南沙区，尽管近年来房地产市场下行很快，去年销售量下跌幅度非常大，库存周期也长，但是也依然坚持限购，目的是为了去房地产依赖，为产业和人才聚集创造条件。另外，广州此次二手房增值税免征期5年改2年，以及针对非户籍人口的首套房购置纳税社保年限从5年收缩至2年。也就是说，以前外地人要交满5年税才能买房，现在只需要2年。这些改变都是旨在促进商品房流通和循环，更好地满足新市民、年轻人和外来人口扎根1线城市的诉求。目前，中国各大城市住房需求转向了改善性需求，广州市换房需求也比较突出， 但是同时广州市的外来人口规模庞大，数量超过1000万人，刚需规模较大，呈现出刚需和改善齐头并进的态势，这是广州的特点。近期广州二手房挂牌量快速上升，交易周期明显拉长，价格明显下跌，也导致预期开始悲观，反过来又导致了市场下行。7到8月份，70个大中城市中，广州市的二手住房价格指数跌幅靠前。现在增值税免征期5年改2年的目的，就是为了降低交易环节的成本，促进卖一买一的顺畅，既满足刚需，也疏通换房需求，确保刚需和改善新房和二手住房的良性循环。除了需求端的激励政策之外，此次新政还提出加大保障性住房建设和供给。而关于这一点，李宇嘉解释，这体现了广州新政的基调依旧是坚持房住不炒，不以房地产作为短期刺激经济的手段，供需两端同步发力，突出供给侧改革，避免行业和市场大起大落。数据显示，8月底认房不认贷等新政开始以来的3周，广州市的房地产市场的成交量增长幅度分别为 15%、6% 和负的 6%， 增长幅度可以说是明显逐步减小，刺激效果逐步消失。数据显示，新政之后，广州的购房意愿、价格上涨预期均不及北京和上海。因此，李宇嘉表示，综合以上来看，广州迫切需要发布新的政策来提振市场情绪，避免预期恶化和市场下行形成恶性循环，防止楼市对投资、消费等基本面形成明显的拖累。因此，此次一揽子政策更是意在托底，是为了稳定市场情绪，避免大幅下行。而今年还剩不到4个月的时间，政府期望广州的商品房市场可以从过快下滑转入到探底企稳的走势。而对于北京、上海、深圳这3个一线城市是否会跟进放松限购，这也是大家十分关注的一个问题。中原地产的首席分析师张大伟在接受证券时报采访时表示，广州此次限购放松十分谨慎，而且广州的落户难度是4个一线城市里相对容易的。从整体来看，广州调整限购本身的影响不大，但是对于市场的心理影响比较大。市场会期待北京、上海、深圳也同样松绑调整限购政策。目前来看，全国限购政策最严格的是上海，针对外地户籍单身限购。而如果叠加落户难度来看，北京和上海的限购影响一样大。广州和深圳则因为落户难度相对不大，所以放松限购的影响也不会太大。所以在广州之后，深圳是最有可能会微调限购政策的城市。而与此同时，美国这边的楼市情况怎么样呢？周四公布的最新数据显示，美国8月份房屋销售跌至1月份以来的最低水平，但是房价却大涨。华尔街日报报道，由于美国的高利率抑制了需求，8月份二手房销售降幅为今年1月份以来的最低水平。美国今年房屋销售大幅下滑，但是房价又开始上涨，这是因为挂牌待售的房屋数量持续保持在较低水平，迫使许多买家参与价格战来竞争一个房源。8月份，美国全国的现房中位价格同比上涨了 3.9%， 达到407100美元，这是自1999年有记录以来的第4高水平。全国房地产经纪人协会在周四表示，占房地产市场大部分的成屋销售量8月份环比下降 0.7%， 销售额则同比下降 15.3%， 而利率上升可能会进一步减缓销售。上个月，美国抵押贷款利率升至 7% 以上，创20年来的新高，这是美联储遏制通胀和冷却经济的结果之一。高利率和高房价的结合降低了购房负担能力。美联储在本周的会议上投票决定维持利率稳定，但是暗示可能在今年晚些时候再次加息。考虑到房屋签订的时长，8月份的销售数据在很大程度上其实是反映了买家在今年夏季早些时候做出的购买决定，而当时的抵押贷款利率要低于今天，因此最近的利率上涨可能会进一步减缓未来的销售。全国房地产经纪人协会表示，截至8月底，美国有110万套待售或者待签约的房屋，比7月下降 1% 左右，比2022年8月则下降了 14% 之多。按照目前的销售速度，8月底市场上的房屋供应量可以供3.3个月使用。 一位打算换房的买家表示，他出售现有房屋没有任何困难，而要购买一套符合他预算的房子却很难，市场上没有多少房屋可以去看。大多数有抵押贷款的业主手头的利率要低于当前水平，他们不愿意出售房屋，并且以更高的利率来接受新的抵押贷款。数百万美国人也在疫情推动的房地产繁荣期间购买了房屋，近期他们不再需要再次购房。房地产经纪人协会表示，美国的西部地区现房销售环比跌幅最大，下降了 2.6%， 南部地区下降 1.1%， 而新泽西的纽瓦克在8月份的销售价格同比涨幅最大，房价上涨了 16.7%， 其次是迈阿密上涨 14.6%， 而德克萨斯州的奥斯汀房价跌幅最大，下跌了 7%。另外，8月份首次购房者的市场比例为 29%， 与去年同期持平， 27% 是以现金购买的，要高于去年同期的 24%， 主要是因为现在极高的还款利率。美国住宅建筑商协会本周表示，9月份美国建筑商信心指数连续第2个月下降。美国商务部则说，衡量美国房屋建设情况的房屋开工率8月份较7月份下降了 11%， 住宅许可可能会成为未来房屋建设的风向标，8月上涨了 6.9%。以上就是今天新风视线的全部内容，感谢您的收看。如果喜欢，记得点赞并且订阅我们的频道。我们下期节目再见。
Paramount leader Xi Jinping has been widely blamed by foreign governments and media for failing to take effective measures to remedy an economy hurt by excessive leverage, weak exports, anemic consumer spending, and the massive withdrawal of investment by multinationals. Yet President Xi Jinping, who is Chinese Communist Party (CCP) General Secretary and Chairman of its Central Military Commission (CMC), has long been lauded for his grasp of Machiavellian palace intrigue and factional manipulations. For example, while the so-called Xi Jinping faction did not even exist when the 70-year-old first came to power in 2012, the 20th Party Congress last October saw his acolytes monopolize the bulk of seats on the CCP Central Committee, the Politburo Standing Committee, PBSC, as well as the top echelons of the People's Liberation Army, PLA. Over the past 2 months, evidence has frequently emerged that dozens of bad apples are being detained for infractions including corruption, leakage of state secrets, and failure to carry out the commander-in-chief's orders, particularly among Xi Jinping protégés. These intriguing developments run counter to the conventional wisdom that Xi Jinping is a master of the party. That this series of stunning personnel movements has not been explained to the public only adds to the intrigue, and contributes to the CCP's reputation for lack of transparency. Title 1: High-ranking disappearances. Foreign Minister Qin Gang, a key Xi Jinping protégé, was dumped from his post in late July after a disappearance of more than 2 months. Former Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who was promoted to the Politburo at the 20th Party Congress, was then reinstated in his place. Officials have refused to make any comments on these unusual moves. Owing to Wang's absence at the G20 summit in New Delhi earlier this month, as well as his no-show at the recent annual opening session of the UN General Assembly, there has even been speculation that Wang, another Xi Jinping favorite, might be in trouble. These rumors were only dismissed this week when the Ministry of Foreign Affairs disclosed that he had met with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in Malta on September 17, and then when a Xinhua dispatch the following day announced that he would be traveling to Moscow for talks with top Russian diplomats. Another mystery surrounds the unexplained 3-week disappearance of Minister of National Defense General Li Shangfu. Li had decades of experience managing China's missile and space programs as well as the procurement of hardware from Russia and other countries. The Foreign Ministry spokespeople have refused to confirm or deny either his whereabouts or whether he remains as defense minister. However, Li's fall from grace was apparently confirmed by a social media posting by Rahm Emanuel, the American ambassador to Japan, who analogized China's elite politics to Agatha Christie's famous novel And Then There Were None. It transpires that General Li, who was reportedly detained around September 1, was accused of large-scale corruption when he headed PLA departments responsible for the acquisition of military equipment. In 2018, during his time as head of the CMC Equipment Development Department, CMED, which he led from 2017 to 2022, the U.S. government sanctioned Li for his role in procuring sophisticated weaponry from Russia. It was believed that he colluded with the top echelons of the rocket force and the CMED to line their own pockets while buying and selling components of expensive weapons, including missiles and satellites. General Li's downfall comes at a time when the PLA rocket force, in charge of missiles and nuclear weapons, is also undergoing a thorough purge. On August 1, Xi Jinping replaced General Li Yuchao, the commander of the rocket force, and its political commissar General Su Zhonghua, with Generals Wang Hobin and Su Shisheng. More than 10 top echelon officers in the rocket force, as well as CMSED, were also hauled in by military disciplinary departments as part of investigations for alleged graft-related crimes. Disciplinary and state security authorities are also investigating allegations that senior rocket force officers have leaked secrets to American intelligence concerning the makeup of the force, the location of missile silos, and other logistical and operational materials. General Li Yuchao's son, who is based in the United States, is suspected to have close ties with U.S. spies. The ongoing purges of the rocket forces and the CMSED could also implicate another crony of Xi Jinping's, the first vice-chairman of the CMC, General Zhang Youxia. A lifelong expert in military equipment and logistics, General Zhang's father had worked together in PLA divisions in Shaanxi in the 1940s with Xi Jinping's father, Xi Zhongshuan. General Zhang, who is deemed close to Xi Jinping, has not been seen in public since August 30. Title 2: Questionable Decision-Making. Xi Jinping's decision to replace the ousted commander and political commissar of the rocket force with officers who have had no previous experience with missiles and other nuclear weapons is unconventional. General Wang, a former deputy naval commander, had served in the Navy most of his career, and General Su was a veteran of the Air Force. Given that nuclear missiles and related weapons are expected to play a pivotal role in possible military maneuvers such as an invasion of Taiwan, putting two leaders with no experience in the technology-intense rocket force could not only have deleterious effects on the force's operational capabilities, but could also cause resentment among senior officers, many of whom are well-trained aerospace engineers. In a speech given on the eve of the August 1st Army Day this year, she admonished the troops to deeply push forward preparations for military struggle and raise officers' ability to prepare for war. He also vowed to push forward the campaign to rectify the style and practice of the PLA, straighten up disciple and fight against corruption among PLA officers in both depth and width. Xi Jinping also doubled down on the importance of the PLA's absolute loyalty to the orders of the Central Party authorities. This kind of rhetoric echoes exhortations that have been seen in speeches and policy documents for years, in particular during the Xi Jinping era, which has seen an enduring focus on reforming and modernizing the PLA. Experts in the United States and Taiwan are divided on whether the contretemps that Xi Jinping has faced in the PLA and the possibility that the efficacy of Chinese missiles, nuclear submarine and other heavy-duty weapons might have been compromised by corruption might cause delays to the dictator's ambitions for national reunification. U.S. Ambassador Emanuel, who has been outspoken of late in his remarks on China, quoted Shakespeare's Hamlet in his assessment of the Li Shangfu debacle: "Something is rotten in the state of Denmark." Nevertheless, the supreme leader is still committed to his theory that the East is rising and the West is declining. In addition, events in elite Chinese politics have certainly not dented the commitment of the leadership corps to building what commentators in the U.S. have termed an axis of autocratic states to counter the alleged eastward movement of NATO, something that Wang is expected to further cement on his trip to Moscow this week. Growing doubts about Xi Jinping's ability to handle the military overlaps with and exacerbates concerns that have increased this year over China's control of the economy and other aspects of the polity. The enthusiasm of multinationals in investing in China, already cooling, could weaken further still. According to Fitch Securities, foreign direct investment, FDI, in the first 7 months of 2023 declined by 9.8% compared to the same period last year. Moreover, direct investment liabilities, another gauge of FDI in China, slumped to just $4.9 billion in the second quarter of 2023, according to the State Administration of Foreign Exchange. This was down 87% from the same period last year and was the smallest amount in any quarter since 1998. The supreme leader's less than satisfactory performance could have knock-on effects, hurting the confidence of ordinary Chinese, whose desire to spend, especially on apartments and other big-ticket items, is already low. Conclusion: China's position as leader of the axis of autocratic states will be spotlighted during next month's grand celebration in Beijing of the 10-year anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative, another of Xi Jinping's geopolitical grand schemes. Much Chinese power projection in Asia and around the world is dependent on generous financial offerings. The precipitous drop in the standard of CCP governance, with its attendant impact on the economy, could change this. Increased uncertainty in both the caliber of personnel in key positions in the military and in Xi Jinping's ability to select the right people for the job could handicap Xi Jinping's room for maneuver. The Supreme Leader's persistent lack of transparency as he reshuffles his top brass will serve to deepen the country's problems, a state of affairs that is unlikely to change while he remains in power. While we do not know where Qin Gang, Li Shangfu, and their fellow disgraced officials are, we are ever more aware of where Xi Jinping's China is heading.
气候抗议和公民不服从。在2023年9月17日星期日，有75000人走上纽约街头，与联合国会议同时举行，呼吁采取更激进的气候政策。这场抗议规模庞大，是各种气候团体联合组成的产物，其中一些团体甚至从华盛顿特区、亚特兰大、芝加哥和德克萨斯赶来，支持者乘坐大巴前来。也许跋涉最远的团体是一群韩国气候活动家，他们飞到纽约抗议日本福岛核废水的释放。尽管这场大规模的气候抗议引起了媒体的广泛关注，但随后的计划中公民不服从行动却受到了较少的媒体关注。警方在那一天逮捕了100多名活动人士。游行并未向纽约市警察局申请抗议许可，它始于祖科蒂广场，正是占领华尔街运动于2011年9月17日开始的地点，距今差不多整整12年。或许这可以解释为什么有如此庞大的警力出现。
So I'm going to go through a couple of the action agreements for today. So action agreement 1, we move as a group. We want people to stay in their groups together. We will eventually break off at some point into different marches. 2, we are creating and inviting an accessible action. Be mindful of the risk you're putting yourself and others into as we're all marching together. Okay? So be mindful. We are going to engage in social distancing, many of us, but be mindful of your actions and how they may impact people who may not want to engage in social distancing. 3, we are trying to go for the lowest charge. Okay? So to repeat that, we are trying to go for the lowest charges. We are not trying to get the highest charges. In order to engage a massive people in a massive disobedience, we want to...
在这段视频中，你可以听到纽约市警察局使用扩音器向抗议者发出警告，扩音器播放着预先录制的信息。这是纽约市警察局，你非法走在道路上，我命令你立刻回到人行道上。如果你自愿这样做，将不会对你提起任何指控。如果你继续留在道路上，拒绝使用可用的人行道，你将被逮捕。
refuse to use the available sidewalk, you will be subject to arrest. This is the New York City Police Department. You are unlawfully walking.
Fire, take the front.
有时似乎每名抗议者都有2名以上的警察。抗议者在金融区蜿蜒前行，然后封锁了纽约联邦储备银行的入口，位于 Maiden Lane。在这里还可以看到纽约市警察局正在遵循其关于抗议的新政策。纽约市警察局根据一项诉讼裁决，该裁决认为在2020年关于乔治·弗洛伊德警察谋杀案的抗议活动中侵犯了抗议者的公民自由权利，因此制定了新政策。该裁决是在纽约市警察战略反应小组 SRG 于2020年6月4日在莫特哈文大规模围捕、殴打和大规模逮捕抗议者之后做出的。当时创下了1300万美元的示威者和与抗议者一起被逮捕的新纪录，包括记者、法律援助观察员和医疗人员。
You are ordered to disperse now to permit the safe flow of pedestrian traffic. If you do so voluntarily, no charges will be placed against you. If you refuse to disperse, you will be placed under arrest and charged with disorderly conduct. This is the New York City Police Department. You are unlawfully obstructing pedestrian traffic. You are ordered to disperse now to permit the safe flow of pedestrian traffic. If you do so voluntarily, no charges will be placed against you. Disperse now to permit the We want more to disperse now to permit the safe flow of pedestrian traffic. If you do so voluntarily, no charges will be placed against you. If you refuse to disperse, you will be placed under arrest and charged with disorderly conduct. This is the New York City Police Department. You will no longer be obstructing pedestrian traffic. Order to disperse now to permit the safe flow of pedestrian traffic. If you do so voluntarily, no charges will be placed against you. If you refuse to disperse, you will be placed under arrest and charged with disorderly conduct. 'Of disorderly conduct. If you do not cooperate and accompany the arresting officer to the prisoner transport vehicle, or if you resist arrest, you may be charged with additional crimes. Since you have refused to disperse, you will be placed under arrest on the charge of disorderly conduct. If you do not cooperate and accompany the arresting officer to the prisoner transport vehicle, or if you resist arrest, you may be charged with additional crimes. Since you have refused to disperse, you will be placed under arrest on the charge of disorderly conduct. If you do not cooperate and accompany the arresting officer to the prisoner transport vehicle, or if you resist arrest, you may be charged with additional crimes. Since you have refused to disperse, you will be placed under arrest on the charge of disorderly conduct. If you do not cooperate and accompany the arresting officer to the prisoner transport vehicle, or if you resist arrest, you may be charged with additional crimes.
在达成和解协议后，该市旨在限制 SRG 的部署。在2023年9月5日，纽约州总检察长与法律援助协会发布了一份新闻声明，解释了纽约市警察局对抗议活动的新层级响应。 声明指出，在第一层级中，纽约市警察局可能会部署巡逻警官来重新引导车辆或行人交通，以协助抗议活动。这些巡逻警官不能来自纽约市警察战略反应小组 SRG， 也不得携带与这些单位专属的装备。在这里，你可以看到战略反应小组的成员逮捕抗议者并管理交通。这与同一天市长办公室发布的新闻稿相符。该新闻稿指出，纽约市警察局可以在抗议活动附近增派额外的警官，包括 SRG， 以预期可能需要执法干预。第三层级是在有理由相信某人已经犯罪时生效。纽约市警察局将部署足够的警官来处理违法行为的个人。在这一层级中，可能会根据需要部署特殊单位，如 SRG。
across the South, and also communities that are facing the impacts of climate change all over the world. So there's a huge movement happening in Texas to build a just and people-centered economy. We need to stop the fossil fuel billionaires from ruining our coasts in Texas, ruining health and environmental justice communities, and that's why I'm in New York. Yeah, absolutely.
obstructing pedestrian traffic. You are ordered to disperse now to permit the safe flow of pedestrian traffic.
市长办公室的这份新闻发布稿已从市长办公室的网站上删除，似乎 SRG 在应对抗议活动方面的角色仍未明确定义，并显示出纽约市市长办公室与纽约州总检察长办公室之间协调不足的情况。谢谢您的收看，这是华尔街前线。
In 2022, after 6 consecutive years of declining birth rates, China recorded its first annual population decline since the early 1960s. According to a forecast by the United Nations, China's population is set to fall from 1.426 billion in 2022 to 1.313 billion in 2050 and drop below 800 million by 2100. The problem for China, though, isn't simply a falling population but rather the worsening ratio of retirees to individuals of working age, which will increase the burden on income earners to support the rest of the population. Every estimate and forecast we found that China's old age dependency ratio will continue to rise in the coming decades. The overall trajectory of China's demographic shift is by no means unusual, as it has been following the path of other East Asian countries. Japan's population began to decline in 2009 and South Korea's in 2021. However, as a result of the one-child policy and rapid urbanization, China's population growth has receded more quickly and at a much lower level of per capita wealth than almost any other country. China does not have the highest dependency ratio, but it is distinctive in how quickly that ratio is rising relative to its income levels. As a consequence, China is quickly growing old before it becomes rich. Title 1: The Risks. Many observers have expressed concern over the long-term impact of China's demographic trends given the country's weak social safety net, particularly for rural residents since many of them do not have access to adequate healthcare or pensions. A declining population will also exacerbate issues in the housing sector as fewer people will need to buy homes. This decline in demand could lead to a long-term oversupply of housing in a market that's already desperate for buyers. Some observers, such as James Liang, have hypothesized that a smaller, older population could worsen the country's innovation capacity. Given China's central role in the global economy, structural challenges that could potentially slow long-term growth, such as demographic trends, merit close scrutiny. Even more importantly, perhaps, is assessing the government's response to these issues and the policy tools at its disposal. When looking beyond the headlines, there is a vigorous debate among scholars about how painful these adjustments will be. What emerges is a more complicated picture regarding the economic consequences of China's demographic transition. For example, Bert Hoffman, previously chief representative for the World Bank in China who now heads the East Asian Institute at the National University of Singapore, argues that population decline by no means spells doom for China. If the government can effectively implement policy reforms to better prepare the economy for the aging population, China could still avoid a demographic crisis. Others agree that population decline itself will not cause a crisis, but they are concerned that the broader structural challenges will be exceedingly difficult for China to manage. For example, Scott Rozelle, SCCI, Stanford University, and partner with SAIS on Big Data China, has found that demographic patterns are more directly correlated with growth when the economy is highly dependent on low-end manufacturing and cheap wages. China has already shifted away from that model of development. The low level of education of much of the workforce and the structure of China's economy, however, are far more concerning. much of the rural population has only access to low-quality education, translating to millions of young people underqualified for skill-intensive jobs in high-tech industries that are needed to propel China toward high-income status. The primary policy response so far by Chinese officialdom to the demographic challenge has been an attempt to boost fertility rates. China ended its nearly 40 years of strict birth control in 2016, and then officially adopted a three-child policy in 2021. However, socioeconomic issues, including anxiety over the rising costs of living and raising a child, and gender inequality in the workplace remain powerful deterrents for women considering having children. For example, with no national law on paternity leave to complement maternity leave, Chinese women are often expected to be the primary caretakers for children and put their careers second. As a result, working women face substantial job discrimination. Many working women have struggled to achieve independence and are not willing to sacrifice their careers and living standards to have more children. Without better welfare provisions or reforms to parental leave, efforts to boost fertility are unlikely to be successful. But the size and distribution of the population is only part of the equation. At a lower level of economic development, raw manpower is extremely important in generating growth. But as the economy advances, a stronger safety net and mechanisms to develop and harness human talent become more important. This is consistent with the analysis of scholars like Hoffman and Rosell, among others, who emphasize that China's best approach going forward is to tackle some of the structural issues affecting labor productivity and human capital, all of which could hamper long-term growth. Title 2: Why Demography Isn't Destiny. Scholars of demography and China's economy point to several areas that could help dampen the downsides of an aging population. Number 1, focus on productivity. The main demographic challenge facing China in the coming years is not the number of people in the workforce, but rather, the economy's overall productivity and the financial burden of retirees on the working-age population. Many economists agree that economic reforms could improve productivity as well as free up household savings to boost consumption. Policy goals should include enhancing the efficiency of the financial system, strengthening the fiscal system, improving the environment for the private sector, encouraging labor mobility through reform of the household registration (hukou) system, and de-escalating tensions with advanced economies. In today's China, low-skilled workers have increasingly few options as they leave the agricultural sector. Rosell and his colleagues point out that jobs in manufacturing and construction are declining due to a combination of offshoring, automation, and a slowdown in the real estate sector. Thus, many lower-skilled workers are being forced to enter the labor-intensive service sector, taking jobs that are often poorly regulated and relatively insecure. A growing informal sector and uneven access to education may worsen these trends, posing a challenge for China's future economic trajectory. Number 2, develop a better educated labor force. Chinese graduates currently entering the labor force have on average 12 years of education, while those about to retire have an average of only 7 years. Hoffman points out that this improved human capital can lead to increased productivity and general economic growth. However, research by Rosell and others highlights that even though access to schooling is increasing in rural areas, the quality of education remains wanting. China's average educational attainment is still lower than that of other countries at comparable levels of per capita income. Continuing education and retraining are also going to be increasingly important as the economy changes. The current education situation suggests that workers may find it challenging to transition from low-skilled to high-skilled jobs, potentially undermining China's transition to high-value-added manufacturing. Number 3, raise the retirement age. China's current retirement age is among the lowest in the world, currently 60 for men, 55 for female office workers, and 50 for female blue-collar workers, and this hasn't changed in decades despite the rising life expectancy. Based on Hoffman's estimates, if China's elderly were to have the same labor force participation as Japan, there would be about 40 million more people at work by 2035. In China, there has been a debate about raising the retirement age, with proposals suggesting 65, but so far, the leadership has not explicitly shown the political will to move the policy forward. Number 4, support automation. China is already at the forefront of automation, thanks to a government push to accelerate the adoption of industrial robots. This trend could mitigate the decline in population and skilled workers in the long term. It could also help counter the flow of labor-intensive businesses out of China as wages continue to rise. This could, however, create new challenges as low-skilled workers are forced to enter the labor-intensive service sector as manufacturing jobs become even scarcer. Some research on the deployment of robots in China has found negative effects on employment and wages, suggesting that there is still much to be learned on the impact of automation. Number 5. Strengthen the social safety net. A better social safety net would have multiple benefits for the economy, including potentially incentivizing families to have more children. The first step is a stronger healthcare system that is accessible to the entire population at an affordable cost. China only spends less than 6% of its GDP on healthcare, compared to around 10% in the European Union and Japan. Low investment in healthcare means that senior care may be inadequate and place a higher burden on households. In addition, a better pension system would reduce the impact of the growing old age dependency ratio on society, as households could count on reliable sources of funding to help support older relatives. Currently, the system discriminates against rural residents, while civil servants and public institution employees receive much better old age insurance. A sustainable pension system would require the government to extend coverage to younger migrant workers and improve the fairness between different pension schemes to strengthen people's incentives to participate. Relatedly, Chinese authorities need to expand the pension system and ensure its solvency is guaranteed regardless of the business cycle or other structural problems. Number 6. Open inward immigration. Currently, China continues to experience negative net migration, meaning that more people move abroad than those who migrate into the country. China has a very small number of inward immigrants, perhaps the lowest in Asia. There are almost no immigrants employed in labor-intensive sectors, with most being expats in white-collar jobs. Obtaining work authorization and access to social services is quite difficult for foreign workers in China. Expanding opportunities and access to affordable healthcare could increase China's attractiveness for workers, improve the overall work environment, and help reduce the burden of retirees on the economy. Although the economic rationale for expanding inward immigration is clear, there is very little policy debate within China about moving in this direction. In practice, since China introduced its green card system in 2004, it has only issued about 11,000 10-year residence permits from 2004 to 2016. Over that same period, the United States issued nearly 12 million green cards. Conclusion. The graying of the population certainly puts pressure on China's economic growth trajectory, but demography does not have to be destiny. The more important question is whether the Chinese government can respond effectively and quickly to the challenges posed by demographic trends. If the government manages to raise the productivity of the labor force and build a strong social safety net alongside other initiatives, then having an older population need not translate into economic decline. To live up to the challenge, however, the government will need to make many difficult decisions in the near term to correct its investment and development goals. Although some efforts are underway, including attempts at hukou reform and investment in education, the government will need to take more comprehensive action to address the challenges ahead. If Beijing fails to plan accordingly, the consequences attached to a declining population may well have large-scale negative implications for its economy.